Okay, doing a little research on vaccines and stuff. So the first thing I did, because I remember hearing something about it, that um, European scientists and let's see, national government confirms. All right, times. This might be going to what I was looking for, and so the European Union Times. This was oh shit. I mean, just a couple months ago. So, expert working for the government found a causal link between vaccines and autism, but federal lawmakers, influenced by the powerful pharmaceutical lobby, helped bury that info in an episode of award-winning journalist Cheryl Atkinson's program, Full Measure. She breaks down a scientist relied on. She breaks down how a scientist relied on the government to debunk vaccine autism claims, was silenced after reporting there was indeed a link between the neurological disease and vaccines. So, okay. And the thing is, go to Health Impact News. I never, you know. So this is in March, showing a link between vaccines and autism. So, as often repeated falsely, is often the repeated fallacy that there is no research that supports the suspicion that vaccines can cause autism. The talking point is more often repeated by medical personnel and public health officials who have simply never been told that these studies exist, and in some cases, those who refuse to read the information when it is offered to them. So they continue to labor under the false assumption that vaccine autism causation is merely an internet rumor or as a result of one paper that was published in 1998. Okay. So, just to, show fairness. And so, real quick, my stance on it is I support some vaccines. I don't believe in being overly medicated, though. I mean, that may be contrary to what some believe about me. But that's the thing, is that the pharmaceuticals are worse for me than drinking beer and smoking pot. Which is why I do it, because it actually helps calm me down from pain and my dealing with certain stuff. So, anyways, the just like antibiotics, people get too many antibiotics and everything like that and become immune to them, which is why there's a lot of resistance in. There's it's good to be clean, but not too clean, because we have to keep our immune systems working and adapting to new germs and such. So has found that there is no link between the MMR vaccine and autism. Okay, so yeah, certainly there might be certain vaccines that haven't really proven anything, or haven't, that haven't caused autism, because they might be new, or maybe they just don't, and it's completely plausible. And some people just might have the side effects, and some maybe they're hiding the studies on the side effects and stuff, or the research on the side effects. So, all right, let me go to. Oops, pardon me. Let me go to. It's scary. Shoot, what was it? let me just put. This is the one I was looking for.
We need to meet a new constraint, and that constraint has to do with CO2. CO2 is warming the planet. And
what does this have to do with vaccines? You'll listen to what Bill Gates has to say, then you'll find out.
The equation on CO2 is actually a very straightforward one. If you sum up the CO2 that gets emitted, that leads to a temperature increase. And that temperature increase leads to some very negative effects. The effects on the weather, perhaps worse, the indirect effects in that the natural ecosystems can't adjust to these rapid changes, and so you get ecosystem collapses. Now, the exact amount of how you map from a certain increase in of CO2 to what temperature will be and where the positive feedbacks are, there's some uncertainty there, but not very much. And there's certainly uncertainty about how bad those effects will be, but they will be extremely bad. I asked the top scientists in this several times, do we really have to get down to near zero? Can't we just, cut it in half or a quarter? And the answer is that until we get near to zero, the temperature will continue to rise. And so that's a big challenge. It's very different than saying, we're a 12-foot high truck trying to get under a 10-foot bridge and we can just sort of squeeze under. This is something that has to get to zero. Now, we put out a lot of carbon dioxide every year, over 26 billion tons. For each American, it's about 20 tons. For people in poor countries, it's less than 1 ton. It's an average about 5 tons for everyone on the planet. And somehow we have to make changes that will bring that down to zero. It's been constantly going up. It's only various economic changes that have even...
And just real quick, just look at this graph. This is actually, very similar to our population, or the population of the world and whatnot. See, like, right in here, well, I should say, right in this area. Hold on. Well, yeah, right in that area, it was a lot of deaths and everything of that nature. What was it, Spanish flu or something of that nature? They had World War I, and then going to World War II and stuff. Then we have Vietnam. But anyways, let me continue on.
Flattened it all. So we have to go from rapidly rising to falling and falling all the way to zero. This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra. But let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. But there we see do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. But there we see an increase of about 1.3. The second factor is the services we use. This encompasses...
So, all right. I made certain you heard that vaccines thing twice. So we do a really good job with vaccines and Planned Parenthood. Well, I shouldn't say Planned Parenthood. So we're gonna go back to Bill Gates. What is it? Planned Parenthood. Gilgal is said to enjoy a cozy relationship with abortion industry. Yeah. So your father was head of Planned Parenthood. But I think that. So you see, and then scenes tainted. What was this? We got Vac Truth. So, for illegal testing of tribal children in India, it appears his crimes against humanity have finally caught up with him. So, you know, I'm not going. I mean, I've already done a lot of the research into this. I'm just showing y'all, like, oops, I didn't mean. Let me go back. Yeah, let me do tainted Africa. That's India. This goes. Slaughter of innocents linked to tainted vaccines. So the Clinton Health Access Initiative. So immense vaccines are check out Chinooks designed so governments can depopulate the world. That means setting the faults to oh my god. Yeah. So just like our vaccines, you know, let me actually just, you know, well, remember tobacco was good for you. You know, like this whole vaccines thing is a person should be able to do what they want. I mean, with their bodies and such. You know, there's just always a new disease. There always, oops, there are always a new sickness, panic. Just answer the real freaking question. And that's the thing, it's all about blinding us. You know, it's, okay, anti-vax, everyone is, if anyone has a thought, all of a sudden they become the enemy. There's thought crimes. Stop panic due to fear. Why is there always a new sickness, panic? Maybe I should end the world. Alright, so it's just saying, like, well, I mean, that's pretty much what America is suffering, is freaking panic, you know, just widespread panic attack. Park, illness, hysteria. Can't find a little episode. Oh well, you know, it's just, there's just always Zika, Ebola, bird flu, swine flu, you know. So really, all just I mean, it really does become a difficult one, you know, to go after and such. You know, actually, let me just see. something here. Sorry, I'm like trying to get out of this. So heavy metals and oops. And autism. Exposure to heavy metals may increase autism. According to like thallium, lead, cadmium, tin, and mercury are 41% of blood cells taken for children. So heavy metals and vaccines. Demystifying vaccine ingredients, CDC, metal poisoning and vaccine. What is the truth? Health scam exposed. Science-based medicine. So there's a lot to it. Heavy metals in the air. It's going to show chemtrails. Heavy metals are present in the environment, both naturally occurring and man-made. Naturally occurring. Let's actually check this out. New Mexico Health. Sorry, I'm downloading a couple things. Some animal toxic, there's necessarily nutrients for help. Where they have melting from an environment, but naturally occurring. Include mineral deposits in the ores, while man-made sources are generally byproducts of industrial and manufacturing process, such as mining and coal-fired power plants. So I'm actually gonna show you chemtrails exposed. Where is it?
Exhale.
I present.
Aircraft making a condensation trail is very similar in many ways to when you go outside on a cold day and exhale. You create a condensation trail. That little cloud is a condensation trail.
Alright, so, real quick. They're calling it contrails? Really? So this is just the other day. Oh my god. This is over Albuquerque. Geoengineering at its finest. Forgive my computer right now because I'm using my phone as a hotspot and whatnot, but oh, I've got my freaking flash on. Anyways, that's why the sun is out. So this is from my local newspaper. Watching those planes as autumn makes a grand entry. So you've got 1, 2, 3 chemtrails. Well, you got 4, and then you got all the haze over here. It's kind of hard to tell because alright, everybody wants to call me a chemtrail conspiracy theorist. Well, right here, this contrail. Notice how the trail is staying pretty consistent. Notice how the trail is being pretty consistent. That's condensation trail. That's what happens when there's pure efficiency in combustion, because the vapor turns to essentially ice. There is no trail. Basically, when oxygen, combines with the fuel, hydrogen and stuff like that's in the fuel and crap, the hydrocarbons. Byproduct is water, mostly water. See, a big difference. A big difference. That trail has no warm air and it condensates into that, so it looks like we're smoking. Well, that's as far as. Andale. Why are you taking forever? You can see that haze. There's because clouds forming in that pattern, right? See, look at this. There's a guy. Clouds don't form that high, and that's not a contrail. I've seen some earlier. There's a big difference in contrails and chemtrails. See. This is in Washington. I can't see the beacon of which. We see that bastard. Oh yeah. Oh, that's a contrail. That's condensation. And notice they're forming in these lines like a grid pattern, huh? Alright, so you get the point on that. And chemtrails, last chance. Check this one out. See? The guy's turning it off, on and off, on and off. Because what they do is they dump it onto the exhaust, and then let me get out of this and go back to. Look at that. Last chance.
Similar in many ways to when you go outside on a cold day and exhale, you create a condensation trail. That little cloud is a condensation trail. Now, if you take a 2-mile walk on a cold day and you can turn around and you can see your condensation trail tracking all the way back for 2 miles. That's how crazy it is to think that what we're looking in the sky is actually condensation trails.
The contrails, not the chemical, the contrails occur because of cold air, minus 30. It takes high altitude, around 30,000 feet plus. There's carbon dioxide and water vapor in that exhaust. That turns to ice crystals, and that's what you see, the white stream behind it. Those white crystals of ice warm up, dissolve, and the smoke goes away. And it never lasts more than a minute. What we're seeing now, and I first could not believe it, and I started looking at the skies, and these are not normal. They're not natural. there's something going on. I don't know who it is or why they're doing it. All I can testify is it's not natural and it's not normal. It's got to be some outside influence doing that. Thank you.
I'm here to give you testimony that chemtrails, they're not contrails, are indeed real. They're spraying almost every day. I watch the clouds and watch the spraying program going on. I want to tell you that we're in very great danger from the pollution that's coming down over us. And we've been led astray by the military-industrial complex, and they're responsible for the cloud's creation and weather manipulation programs. They're dark operations. That's why they're not out in the media.
I look around and I see people are starting to look up and see this. Many times I've spoken about chemtrails, and I get this blank look on my face. What are you talking about? I'm saying, look up. As a pilot, but before I fly, I look up. And so, boy, they're really out there working.
When you look up at the sun and you see a white haze, that is aluminum floating in the air right now, and it's coming from the aircraft.
There's a huge amount of aluminum being found because these sprays have aluminum, strontium, barium, manganese, and there's a lot of argument that aluminum is very common to be found, but aluminum is only common in a bonded form. It's not common in a free form, and we're finding high rates of free aluminum in the soil, which is not natural.
The metal compounds that are being used are environmentally dangerous. We need to be monitoring them. We need to be testing them.
Okay, these previous guys, I've watched exactly what they do, and yes, they are correct. I've seen exactly the same stuff, so ditto marks on those. You want some figures? Okay, latest water test, tested the rain. 13,100 micrograms per liter of aluminum in the rain in 2013. Normally, it should be 0. So 13,100 is pretty damn much, folks. It used to be 0, then it was 100s in the 2000s, and then since 2010, it's into the 1,000s and the latest 13,100. In the snow on Mount Shasta, pristine Mount Shasta, 61,000 micrograms per liter, 4 times the amount that is found in the soil up there. Where in the hell is this stuff coming from if it's not coming from the soil?
We have clouds in the sky we've never seen before. Almost every day I'm seeing clouds I've never seen before. And NASA has been even named a few of these new clouds. And it's really interesting, but NASA is a corporation. I want you to know that.
NASA has also conducted a research program in what they call metallized fuels. We're actually putting aluminum oxide right in the fuel because it has 2 atoms of aluminum and 3 atoms of oxygen. So during the combustion process, it releases all that oxygen and dramatically increases efficiency. But
just like lead in fuel. Remember lead in fuel back in the day? That's why gasoline says unleaded and there's lead substitutes.
Leaves the aluminum in the air.
We got things coming from sky down, and it's a huge, huge problem. Because as it comes down, what happens is a couple of things. Is that it actually is in our air, we breathe it. And as we breathe it, it's actually going to go up through our nostrils, into our brain, easiest access to our brain frontal lobe. The contaminants that have been identified, which already been mentioned, are aluminum. Aluminum is the #1 free radical generator to the brain to cause early apoptosis, which is early death of brain, and it begins to set off the scar tissue, which we call the amygdalin, which is part of the chemical matrix related to Alzheimer's.
I'm a neurologist practicing in Reading for 17 years. And in the past 5 years, I have seen the number of patients with Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, and other neurodegenerative diseases tremendously increase, almost quadruple.
I became interested in chemtrails about 8 years ago when I was in Hawaii, and the Hawaiians are really being very vocal about it. I concur about the increasing number of Alzheimer's. They have been able to take the...
You just spit whistled that?
No, that was me. They're trying. I guess my brother's trying to learn how to drive, so
no doubt.
Practicing now, and I'm like, what the hell are you?
Well, I haven't, you know, I just got out here, man.
You did see a Honda?
I just got out here this long. Be safe, homie.
Aluminum and micronize it, which means it'll stay up longer. but it also means, and I don't know if any of you have noticed a metallic taste in your mouth when they're spraying, but you inhale that, it goes up through your cribriform plate and through your sinuses and into the brain.
As you heard, to spray nanoparticles, very small particles. These nanoparticles, they basically trigger a programmed cell death in the brain. And that is the ultimate path we see in Alzheimer's.
That's problem number one, because when we look at the Alzheimer issue, we say those are the old. The real problem is, and the real scare I have, is as I am a father of 2, I am a grandfather of 3. So the drama is our children. ADD started in the 70s. Autism was not on the radar. There was no documents, there was no information. It was 1 in 100,000 children. Today, what we have is 1 in 48 boys. I was part of the early group that was looking for aluminum in ADD and ADHD. And all of those children that started to develop those phenomena had high levels of aluminum. When we figured out protocols to detox them out, to free the body of those particular contaminants, what happened is that their brains came back. When we do this to the age, it doesn't come back as quick, but it will come back. But I'm seeing Alzheimer's in 56 years old. Back in the 70s, Alzheimer's when you're...
So, you see what I just did there? I'm educating y'all, and I'm not going to watch the entire video, but you see, like, I actually know what the hell I'm talking about. Alright? I'm that anti-vaxxer. I'm doing research. And my research says that the truth is being silenced, and I strongly implore everyone to really, do your homework and everything, because well, I won't get into some of the other stuff, but 9/11 sickness is very similar, and just pay attention to those chemicals, those minerals, or those elements. Alright? I want y'all to do your homework. And that's the thing, is once you start seeing one thing, you see the other. And, let's see. Play it out on... oh wait, barometric. That's what it was. Barometric bomb. I just came across this video because I was looking at the hoax that is the Oklahoma City bombing.
And sophisticated command post known as C3I, which stood for Communication, Command, Control, and Intelligence.
We're being fed the information secretly, and we know what's going on. I would prefer believing General Parton's explanation than the info explosion. Of course, we have our own definition of what happened.
Their own definition of what happened is a super bomb, which has been touted for months by Ted Gunderson on talk radio.
Now, the way our pineapple bomb works is that a cloud of aluminum, silicate, lead azide, and a few other ingredients is set up so that a specific chain molecule exists, permeates the air all the way around the pillars and so on and so forth. And this cloud is energized with a high voltage pattern, a specific high voltage pattern, which produces a sort of a stairway pattern in the molecular structure of the cloud. Part of that pattern is a hydrodynamic generator, a hydrodynamic power generator, an energy source, shall we say, permeating the cloud, which is then energized with another energy source and then it's detonated. And this causes the cloud itself to explode in such a fashion so that
just
itself to explode in such a fashion so that if the cloud is circulating around the pillar, then it crushes the pillar from all sides and turns that pillar literally to dust and leaves only the rebar behind. So if you've got this cloud permeating all the way around the first floor, wherever it is, anything in its path gets crushed, imploded to dust instantaneously. And when that happens, of course, there's nothing left to hold up the floor is above, so bang, they come down like a pancake.
How does this coincide with the 5 or 6 second differential seen on the seismograms from Oklahoma Geological Center?
Well, the delay in the 2 detonations is very critical. In fact, it's one of the most critical aspects of the bomb that gives it away. And so I'm not going to comment how accurate the seismographic delay is. I'm going to say that it's within the accuracy range that it should be to fit a bomb signature.
Could your bomb have been numbers 2 and 3 that people heard?
Absolutely. In fact, that's what I'm proposing that happened. And number 1 was the info, number 2 was the setup explosion, and number 3 was the final detonation.
Michael Riconosciuto. He's was instant.
Fell apart to this. Here's a slow motion image of these pieces coming down. And a little bit into it, you'll see a piece falling down this corner in front of it. That's the corner of Vesey Street and West Street. Yeah, you see this like a stick. I have a faster.
else doing this, but
yeah, basically the piece comes together. You can't really see it on this thing, but most people who pay attention to this stuff understand it.
I'll just do this one.
Destroy the nod base quickly before it can cause more trouble.
Looks like a nuclear bomb.
So, yeah. You know, and then
right, it went through
a hazmat job. I'm trained in hazmat. The government and everybody else is saying 16% of the people that were down at the World Trade Center are faking their illness. If I could go with my crane and make $100 an hour, do you think I would sit home and not do anything? Or go to all these tests and go to through all the crap that I'm going through? To get social services $305 a month. What am I going to do with $305 a month? Now, if you got people dying, I mean, I don't know about if you're faking it. I mean, once you're dead, you're dead.
oops. So
basically, when I brought that up, 9/11 up, because thermite. Oops. Let me what's it? Cody's lab. Cody.
find yourself in a strange...
Hi everyone, welcome back to Cody's Lab. So today I wanted to make thermite, but challenge myself to use aluminum foil rather than the aluminum powder normally used. Aluminum foil is, after all, still rather popular on YouTube, right? So this...
Talking about conspiracy theorists.
...them to be in better contact. So I think that's pretty good. The iron. And there we are. Ignition. After running it through a few times, the aluminum is getting quite brittle. I'll roll it some more. This I might end because a little blowtorch just won't cut it. Here we go. I'm just going to kind of hit it at the edge. And I think that's a pretty decent thermite reaction. It's not very quick, but it did consume the entire thing. So I think
the Twin Towers had a perimeter of steel panels hoisted up and bolted into place. Each panel had 3 box columns about 14 inches square, cross-connected by spandrel plates. After the plane hit, the fires were burning out and cooling down.
The flames on the south tower, which appear to be getting lesser and lesser, is where the smoke is getting progressively lighter and lighter, indicating that the fire officials are getting closer to putting this fire out.
But then, about 7 minutes before its final destruction, almost an hour after the plane hit, molten metal was seen coming out of the northeast corner near the 80th floor. The red-yellow metal poured from the tower along with a shower of sparks, and looked like steel in a foundry. And there were many eyewitnesses that described molten steel.
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails.
Later, we learned of very small spheres of iron found all through the dust. That iron must have been molten, allowing surface tension to pull it into those spheres. NASA took photos indicating very high temperatures days after the event, and Firewise professors were perplexed by melting of steel beams. And so we have direct video evidence, eyewitness accounts, forensic evidence, photographic evidence, and tangible evidence, all corroborating temperatures high enough to melt steel. The media told us the intense fire, more than the impact, caused the towers to collapse. It melted the structural steel. But there's a problem. Office and open-air jet fuel fires cannot melt steel. The National Institute of Standards and Technology said that the maximum air temperatures was about 1,800 degrees or 1,000 degrees colder than what's needed to melt steel. So what can melt steel and explain all the evidence? Independent scientists began to piece that evidence together, and they suggested some type of thermitic material must have been used as part of the tower's demolition. Thermite is a mix of iron oxide and aluminum, and thermate is a mix of thermite, barium nitrate, and sulfur. But NIST ignored much of the evidence of molten iron or steel. They provided their own theory for that yellow metal pouring from the tower. NIST understood that molten aluminum is silver, not red-yellow. So NIST developed a theory to explain the color issue, stating, the molten metal was very likely mixed with large amount of hot, partially burned solid organic materials, such as furniture, carpet, partitions, and computers, which can display an orange glow much like the logs burning in a fireplace. But there's a problem. Office materials like furniture, carpet, partitions, and computers are less dense and won't mix. They'll float on molten aluminum, like this coin on liquid mercury, and then burn off at those temperatures. And steel at those temperatures won't melt and would sink, and therefore won't mix with the molten aluminum. NIST never conducted any experiments to confirm their theory, but others did. Dr. Stephen Jones proved the NIST molten aluminum and furniture mix theory wrong. Then, an independent peer-reviewed report was published which found explosive red-gray chips all through the dust and positively identified as nanothermite or superthermite. Unlike conventional thermite, this stuff is a very high-tech explosive and confirmed what the independent scientists had been saying all along. But NIST refused to test for explosives or its residue and ignored standards such as NFPA 921 guidelines. The corporate media attacked all the evidence of thermitic material found. Let's watch.
If thermite melts through this steel column, the theory of a thermite-controlled demolition may have some validity. While the truthers insist that more explosive super thermite could have been used in the tower demolitions.
And how stupid is the weaponized word of a truther?
Testing conventional thermite can illuminate this physical process and answer a simple question. Can thermite of any type burn through steel beams? Despite 175 pounds of thermite packed around the steel column, it remained undamaged.
Mythbusters says, the events of 9/11 will not be allowed to be debated and discussed. And they barely managed to melt through the roof of a car with a half a ton of thermite. And the debunking websites say, the thermite would have also needed to cut sideways. Not an easy feat for thermite. You see, it's a powder which burns chaotically. Maybe with some device, but no working device has been...
Don't firecrackers burn chaotically? Gasoline, that's very volatile, but when it's contained and controlled, it's, you know...
proven to me to work to cut a vertical column. So we are led to believe that thermitic material cannot melt steel, cut steel horizontally or vertically, and would take massive amounts to do any real damage. So who's right in this great thermite debate? NIST and the media? Or the independent researchers and scientists who stand nothing to gain? It's time we conduct our own experiments to answer these questions. Can thermitic material melt steel? Can it cut horizontally or vertically? And does it take massive quantities to do any real damage? Many wide-flanged beams were also used in the construction of the towers, connected in a variety of ways. Could thermite cut or weaken such a connection? Using the same beam from my eutectic steel video and another 12-inch beam, I proceeded to make thermite. So I made small quantities of old-fashioned thermate, which is not
and see those ingredients right there? And that's what I'm saying. These are heavy metals and such. Well, and well, aluminum's heavy metal and such, but and that's what they're spraying us with. And this is what's causing all the autism. Well, this is part of the reason for the autism. You know, and that's the thing, is that some people might be already contaminated with heavy metals and everything of that nature. But see, this is going down the rabbit hole, you know, and everything is connected.
An explosive with ingredients that are legal and readily available. Thermate is difficult to ignite. An ordinary fuse is not hot enough. But a magnesium strip, which burns white hot, will ignite the thermate, giving off heat and white smoke. NIST mentions bright white flames. Almost immediately, a bright spot appeared at the top of the window on the 80th floor. An unusual flame is visible within this fire. The upper photograph of a very bright white flame stands out. And let's listen to an eyewitness who was there.
I was on the 81st floor. Tell me what you saw and heard. I had 40 people in there, just an explosion. Just a light flash out my window. My whole doorway to the entrance of my office blew open.
Could these white flashes be some sort of igniter for the thermitic material? In addition to giving off heat and white smoke, thermate produces lots of small spheres of iron. These iron spheres are a natural byproduct of thermate and not from any steel. Just like those iron spheres found all through the dust. I'm an engineer who designs and builds things, and I'm certainly no explosive expert. My first problem was to find a container that could hold the thermate long enough to melt the steel while not melting itself. I didn't think that steel would work as a container, so I had to improvise using some normal roof tile that I cut in half. I then had to devise a way to hold it against the connection. I used strong magnets and a spring tooth from a hay rake to press 5 pounds of thermite on each side of the double angle connection. I lit the thermate. and it did absolutely nothing to the steel connection. Maybe thermate cannot melt steel, and maybe National Geographic was right. But the steel did not melt, meaning that perhaps a container could be made out of steel after all. Using an ordinary steel box tube, I had a slot milled along one edge. Welding the bottom and using clamps on the top to hold the powdered thermate in, I bolted it to a steel. Using an ordinary...
See, right in there. So when it lights, all the energy is focused, because what was happening before was, oops, on. Because what was happening before was everything was spouting out here and the bottom, you know, so there was no, you know, energy and such being directed toward cutting.
Ordinary steel box tube, I had a slot milled along one edge. Welding the bottom and using clamps on the top to hold the powdered thermate in, I bolted it to a steel beam vertically. I called this device my thermitic box cutter. With only 1.5 pounds of thermate, or less than 1/100th of what the National Geographic experts used for their experiment. Not only was I able to melt steel, but it also sliced a vertical cut. So I made a slightly larger thermitic box cutter and used 2 3/8 bolts drilled and tapped on one side of the connection. It only took a slight twist to break it completely off. I noticed as the thermate burned, it tended to lose its cutting power, perhaps because it could expand into the area where the box cutter previously burned. So I built a piston-driven box cutter using a compressed car hatch piston. I added sheets of tungsten to minimize the burnout and allow the piston to slide better. I then bolted my contraption to the flange of the column and ignited the white-hot magnesium. It appears that not only can thermate melt steel, but it can also cut vertical columns. So why bother to use incendiaries like thermate and not high explosives? I think it's all about keeping things quiet before the main event. Using thermate may take longer to weaken such large columns in the towers, which may be why we see the molten steel several minutes before its final destruction. Here is less than 1 3/4 pounds of thermate, or 1/100th of what National Geographic used, quietly burning. And here is less than 4 pounds of thermate focused on the web of a wide flange. Which can also be set up on a vertical column. The web was reduced in thickness with gaping holes, thinned to almost razor sharpness, with a Swiss cheese appearance. NIST rarely mentioned explosions except to say that they didn't exist. Instead, they used the politically correct terms pressure pulses and dust puffs. Repeated pressure pulses. The sources for the pressure pulses and/or dust puffs are unknown. A series of pressure pulses. Perhaps we are seeing a pressure pulse in this video. Rather, and/or dust puffs are unknown. A series of pressure pulses.
And a reason why I'm rewinding this is it's possible, you know, actually, let me, like, people say that a person actually flew.
Perhaps we're seeing a pressure pulse in
like, yeah,
this video.
See right there?
The pressure.
This is disturbing, but people actually believe that's a person right there.
pressure pulse in this video.
See?
Pressure pulse in this.
Blast it.
Are unknown. Perhaps we're seeing a pressure pulse in this video.
It almost looks like a person, huh? It's scary.
Rather than using a mechanical piston to maintain volume, I segmented my box cutter with steel plates, hoping to get a more uniform burn, but got some unexpected results. Can thermate make pressure pulses and or dust puffs? I guess it can. But why waste all that thermate and energy cutting the columns? Why not attack the weakest areas instead? Can thermate cut bolts? I guess it can. But what if just the head of the bolt is exposed rather than the nut and the threads? Can thermate be configured to cut just the bolt head? I guess it can. And without any evidence on the other side. I don't think that something like my piston-driven box cutter was bolted to the office walls, or trash bags full of thermite used. It's more likely that any pre-weakening thermitic material were hidden inside the perimeter box columns. I had a replica of a segment of the WTC box columns made.
And that's what's scary, is that there's actually the suspicion that the building was built with explosives in it. Which, in wars, we, put bombs on bridges. If we hold them, and in case we lose it, we make sure the enemy can't use it. So, I guess to conclude this video, because I've already went on really long, how to remove heavy metals from your body. I'm certain it's gonna say freaking distilled water. Let's see. Try and find a short one. Let's see. Oops.
Today's students.
Distilled water. Why don't we just go ahead and do it? Drink distilled water. It detoxes the body. Amazing.
Hello, YouTubers. It is.
Maybe I don't want to watch that one. Find the chemtrail flu. Oh, that's pretty crazy.
Dr. Billy D here from InnateWater.com with our resident water scientist, Mark Soltinsky.
That's stupid. I mean, all you have to do is distill it. Anyways. Yeah, drink distilled water. That's one way. And do other research and stuff. Especially if, like, you're trying to have kids, definitely try to do a heavy metal detox to minimize your chances of autism, or of your child's autism. Of the autism. Anyways, have a good night, people, and thank you for bearing with me on this trip down the rabbit hole. And so this is, I'm trying to show you that there's links between all this crap. Peace. Be safe, be kind, stay strong. I love you all.